ahead and call to order the Tuesday, November 1st regular meeting of the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors. First up on our agenda, we'll go to Manager Centrise Martin, and she'll let us all know how we can participate in this hybrid format meeting. Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to members of the board, staff, and the public for joining us this evening for the November 1st regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors. This meeting has been properly advertised in accordance with the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act as a hybrid meeting with the option to attend online using the Zoom platform, and the main meeting room is available for members of the public to attend in person. If you are joining the Zoom meeting this evening and wish to speak on behalf of an agenda item, please say your name, municipality of residence, and the topic you wish to speak on when the chairwoman calls on you. Prior to commencing the meeting, I have a few short procedural items to cover. First, members of the public attending using Zoom platform are asked to remain muted during the meeting to prevent any ambient noise from disrupting the meeting. If a member of the public is acknowledged by the chair, they may unmute their microphone for their question or comment. Secondly, board members are asked to indicate their name when motioning or seconding a motion so that the minutes may accurately reflect the action taken. And finally, a roll call of the Board of Supervisors will now be taken to ensure that all members can hear and interact using the Zoom meeting platform. Please indicate you are here when your name is called. Ms. Denini?
Here.
Ms. Stevens?
Here.
Ms. Strickland?
Here.
Mr. Thompson?
Here.
Ms. Williams?
Present.
Thank you. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much. First, I'm going to announce that the board did have an executive session on a matter of property acquisition today prior to this meeting. Then we're going to move into the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll all stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We're going to be moving into citizens input, but before we do that, I do want to acknowledge that this will be the last meeting that Supervisor Williams will be here with us, and I did want to provide an opportunity first to say thank you to Supervisor Williams, and then provide the supervisor with an opportunity to address whomever she would like to address. Ms. Williams.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Can everyone hear me well?
Yes.
I might have a little feedback. First off, I want to say that it's been an honor to serve for the town of Ferguson, Township of Ferguson. I am sad. This is a very bittersweet moment, but I am really inspired by what I feel like I've brought to the board. I am hoping that once I leave, I've inspired more young people within the community, more diverse people within the community, and just people from all different walks of life in general to not only take interest in their community, but to know that they have a place and they are allowed to sit at the table. I want to thank all of the supervisors who have really supported all of the diversity, equity, and inclusion proposals that I've suggested, suggestions concerning the community's health and well-being, and anything that we've talked about. Lisa, I'm sorry that I'm leaving and I can't do some of the things we talked about. This is such a bittersweet moment. For those of you know, I am moving and I got a new position at a different place in Delaware. So that's why I'm leaving. But I just want to say that I really have enjoyed my time. And it is bittersweet, but I hope that everything that's been implemented continues on and just flourishes. And I know that you guys are in great hands with Centrise. And I'm sad to go, but I'm glad that I was able to have this time. And I also want to, good luck again to Jeremy Thompson. I just want to say publicly again, I respect you very much for the way you handled the elections, and the way that you treated me during that time. And I think that the karma has benefited in your favor for that. So I think that's it, because if not, I'm going to start crying, and I do not want to do that. I'm currently at a panel for hazing, so I am sorry that I can't be there. with you all at the moment. But thank you again.
Thank you so much, Tiara, really. And best wishes in your future endeavors. All right.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you, Tiara.
Thank you, Tiara.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes. So, and also, if, you're welcome, if you're moved to continue with more words, I don't want to move us on too quickly. We're all just, very, really happy that you were able to be here, I think, during our strategic planning, and we're going to see that move forward.
Yep.
So tune into our meetings, because you can do it really from anywhere in the world. Got to get that plug in. You've seen it. All right. So thank you. And if nothing else, we'll go ahead and move on to the rest of citizens' input. All right. Any other input for this evening that we'd like to consider for items not on the agenda? Mr. Steve Miller needs, yes, Mr. Miller should take the podium. Sorry. We got a little carried away there. Come on up to the podium, Mr. Miller.
Actually, I wasn't really raising my hand, I was just waving hi.
Oh. Well, you gotta watch out. Now we're ready for that input. Oh, okay, you weren't kidding. Okay, very good. All right, any other citizens' input? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections or changes that we'd like to entertain before I entertain a motion?
Yes, on the previous meeting minutes of the regular meeting, section 8, item D should be officer instead of office
All right, all right.
for the title there, so.
Very good, very good. All right, any other changes? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the October 11th work session minutes and
I move that we approve those minutes.
and the October 18th minutes for the regular meeting.
And the October.
All right, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Mrs. Patty, I'll second.
Okay, fantastic. We have a motion, and a second. Any further changes? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. All right, let's move on to our authorities, boards, and commission reports. Tonight, first up on the agenda, we have Mr. Ford Stryker with the State College Borough Water Authority report. Is Mr. Stryker in the house?
I don't see him.
Okay, we're going to defer that report until perhaps later in the meeting or maybe a future meeting. And we're going to go with our next report, which is Center Region Park and Recreation Authority. Mr. Bill Keogh, I see you right here. Thanks, Bill. Come on up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Board. You should have received, I think sometime this last week, a couple of communications from the Park and Rec Agency that are of interest, and I would have reported on, but since you got that information, you should have gotten an agency director's report. Centrise, do you send that on to each of them?
The agency report from who?
From Mrs. Salkangas?
I think we normally get those through the general forum. They have an agency director's period of time.
Okay.
I don't think that we receive any other kind of reporting from Pam, Ms. Salakangas, other than the usage report.
The usage report.
Right.
Are you
Okay,
referring
okay,
to the
that's it,
usage
that's it.
report?
No, there were two, and that was the second one. The
Okay.
usage report.
Okay,
So you.
Yeah, I provide them with the
Okay.
agenda and they're as part of my manager's report.
I also, of course, sent out my report to you all with some highlighted events that I thought you might be interested in hearing about and/or asking any questions about. So I would be more than happy to answer any questions you might have at this time.
thank you so much, and thank you very much for that thorough report that was in our agenda. Does anyone have any questions for Bill at this time? I don't see any questions. I'm not sure if you were at the facilities meeting this morning. We
No,
talked
I
a
was
little
not.
Okay, we talked a little bit about Whitehall Road Regional Park. I think that facilities is going to be scheduling an additional discussion in regard to that.
Okay.
So
I would
we'll
mention.
have, I think, more questions
Yeah.
after that time.
Yeah.
I would mention Millbrook Marsh because all of us are, in the whole region, are concerned about the walkway through the marsh and the fact that we've had to close down a section of it, and we're moving forward with the development of an alternative plan to replace that section. But our staff has been, our maintenance staff has been doing regular small item repairs on that walkway throughout the summer. Small item repairs that needed to be done in order to maintain the safety of that walkway. Now that we're at the end of the summer, it has become more apparent that there are more sections of that walkway that are further deteriorated than we might have initially thought was the case. And so I'm just giving you a heads up that there's going to be more discussion about the walkway because it is such an important feature of the Millbrook Marsh facility. And it could be, my personal opinion, it could be that we've got a feature that has met or exceeded its realistic life ability. And there are no decisions have been made about any of it, the part that's closed or some of this other stuff. But it is a bit of a moving target, and I know that a lot of people see that feature as a critical feature in that particular park operation. And so I just wanted to mention it to you because it is on the radar at this point in terms of the future.
Thank you so much, Bill. In fact, I'll add a little bit of context to that. In fact, in my recent research on the COG CIP, which we recently reviewed in this body, turns out that that was on the radar in 2015 as a liability. Really the larger issue, and let's be frank about it, is that when we're faced with an $11 million investment into a facility that's owned by a private entity who is in itself in somewhat of a financial crisis, unprecedented as a matter of fact, it gives me pause as to whose responsibility it might be. And what scope of responsibility that we might be considering. So we did hear in facilities that some elected officials feel like we've already maybe made the decision that we're gonna invest that $11 million into that asset, which is a very important asset.
Well, if
But
that,
we need to work out some questions
Yeah.
about what happens to that investment over time before maybe we're ready to come to the table and say we're ready to commit to that. But I think the executive director of COG is here to speak on behalf of the authority in regard to the Millbrook feasibility study number 2, where they're exploring costs of repair and replacement and expansion of our investment in that facility. So I think that's gonna come up right next, but on my computers, I might as well just close it because it's
It is.
completely a brick right now for me. It's not connecting to the internet. So unless we have questions, thank you so much. For Mr. Keough, we will move on to our acknowledgements and then that presentation by the executive director. So if there are any other, and I do appreciate you bringing that to our attention because it's on our radar.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions on a different topic or? that
No,
one?
thanks for the really thorough report. That's so helpful. And I think I'll just add, I think I'd have a lot more questions, but just watching some of the COG committee meetings really is helpful to, fill in on the details of some of these different things. So I appreciate that. And yeah, I'd have questions on Millbrook Marsh, but we're going to have the presentation, so I'll hold off.
I think
on
just
all
one
those.
other quick thing, Madam Chair. It's always a challenge to me to prepare this report because there are so many moving targets within the park and recreation system that we have regionally. So if there is at any point in time something that you would like to hear in terms of report back from me, from the authority, please don't hesitate to give me a call or send me an email so that I can include it. Because otherwise, I'm just guessing sometimes as to where the critical issues are in my report back to you, without making it a 5 or 6 page kind of thing, which I'm not up to anymore. So don't hesitate to ask me.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. We are, I think, I don't know, I'll speak for the board because they're here to call me the carpet if it's not true. We are concerned about the burden on your shoulders. I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
not kidding, because you're managing, through the structure that we've created, an incredibly significant portion of the COG budget.
Mhm.
And it's done in a way that our structure isn't really set up to handle.
Mhm.
So
And,
thank you.
and I appreciate your recognition of that. And you know, the work that has been started with regard to the whole governance discussion is going on, is continuing. And as you noted in my report, we have changed some direction without changing the mission of how we were going to get to resolution with regard to governance. But yeah, I will admit that it has not been an easy path to traverse over the past few months, and I appreciate the fact that you recognize that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, and we'll go ahead and move on to special reports and acknowledgements. And under our first area of diversity, equity, and inclusionary acknowledgements, let's note a few things. How about National Native American, is it month? Oh, I'm sorry, wait, it's Native American, American Indian, and Alaskan Native Heritage Month. It's also Veterans Day coming up. Thanksgiving is also acknowledged this month. And then we'll go ahead and move on to our township and fiscal responsibility reports. And as previously mentioned, we have with us this evening Executive Director Eric Norenberg of the Center Region COG, and he is going to present to us some information about the Millbrook Marsh Boardwalk. Valued asset in the region and something of importance and discussion at this time.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, board members. We just have a quick update. I know Bill covered some of the current issues. For some time, the phase 2 of the planning study has been underway, and the consultant Land Associates will be preparing and delivering by November 9th a final draft report, which will be shared with the Parks Capital Committee and Authority for their joint meeting on November 10th. There's also the feasibility working group that will be meeting on the 14th, who will see that report. All of these groups are asked to provide feedback on that report so that the final report can be received. I think the target is early December. So we're really in the final stages of getting that report. I know there's 2 scopes of work that have been identified and were reviewed and discussed in the previous draft, and that, as you mentioned, was a comment of discussion this morning in the Facilities Committee. So this is an opportunity for final feedback before that report gets finalized, and then will be obviously discussed through the COG committee process and presented in detail to the municipalities in December and January.
Thanks, Eric. Could we pop a map up that we find in our agenda? There's a map of the, I'm sorry to spring that on you. I'm like, pivot, we're gonna maybe ask some questions while staff gets this map up for us, but there's a couple maps in the agenda. It doesn't really matter which one. There's one that has 2 areas highlighted with closures, and there's one that has 1 area highlighted with closures. We could pick either one.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, the map is located where? Which map are we
It
referring to?
would be an attachment with the Millbrook Marsh presentation. I think it's actually the first. There's one attachment that has several meshed within it. I believe it would be the first or second page in that grouping of attachments. Just what I'm going to talk about is a little bit about the scope. So, Eric, Mr. Nuremberg, thank you so much for being here. And we might call you back up for any questions. But so you talked a little bit about the scope, the $6 million versus $11 million bids, which are not bids, budgets. Yep, that's one of the maps. Yeah, I wonder how big we can blow that up. Yeah. Thanks. So just going back to my question, that $6 million budget and then the $11 million budget, it's actually not 2 different scopes, if I understood. This is like a question. That would be for the same project, but one would be a way that there wouldn't be change orders that would be permitted, and the other way would have the change order permitted. And then the $6 million was the change orders are allowed, and then the $11 million is the change orders are not allowed. So that's the same scope, but it's sort of estimated with very different numbers based on perhaps possibility of change orders, if I understood. So right now, up on the screen is the map of the closure of the boardwalk, and it's the black area, right? If you could see the key to that, right? So that right now is currently closed. And right now, if I understand, even though the feasibility study is not done, it's $6 or $11 million, same scope to reopen that and then also replace the rest of everything you see on the map. It's full replacement. I'm sorry, this is a question. Mr. Nuremberg, do you mind hopping back up there? It's a question. And then I just remember from the Park Authority meeting then, in addition to the boardwalk, could you maybe point out where the Clearwater easement is, where Penn State holds its classes, the Fen? I think that the budget is talking about maybe investing in the Fen, where that's located. Like, could you kind of help us, orient us to where the project's going to take place, the components of it?
This is a little bit beyond my expertise in terms of navigating the map, but the areas that are in red are the boardwalk pathways that are, as my understanding, proposed to be replaced under the project. The different scopes of work that are being examined are traditional construction versus design build, which could expedite the project. And your public works director could probably explain design build maybe a little bit better than I could for you, but the idea was to have some of the design figured out as the project is moving ahead in order to perhaps minimize some of the disruption to the native plants in the marsh, as well as to reduce some of the cost of design ahead of time and figure it out as they go, so to speak. That's paraphrasing, but
pause right there then. So I'm also new to this, and since it's not a Ferguson Township project and it's a COG project, I guess this will be the time to ask those questions about what design build means, given that we're going to be funding, perhaps asked to fund this. So if, so there's a certain scope that's established prior to embarking on a design. So if we're gonna, I guess I'm asking, have we essentially decided already that that's going to be that the scope is going to be, if we embark on that pathway, are we then saying that that's the scope that we want to build to, or?
At this point, I think we're better off waiting for the final report so that we know exactly what the scope is. and can comment on the recommendation of the committee rather than, well,
Okay, sure.
yeah,
So let's go to the committee for a second. So could you talk a little bit about the working group committee, and then also in some of the attachments, it talks about the Millbrook Marsh Advisory Committee. Those minutes used to, so there's a relationship between the CRPR and the Millbrook Marsh Advisory Committee, and I think that it used to be on the website. It's not there anymore. Could you help us understand who's on that advisory committee? If I understand, I think there's an attachment in the agenda. So if those are confused about where I got this information, it's just from the attachment that CRPR put out about the update. I think if I recall correctly, it was the advisory committee recommended LAN, and then LAN recommended this scope. LAN is the contract holder. Could you talk to us a little bit about the advisory committee, who comprises that, and then the working group, who comprises that kind of got us to this point?
Well, I left those notes over here. I didn't know I was gonna be quizzed on all of this.
No quiz, just actually, when we start to hear $11 million being requested, it's not really about a quiz, it's just really more about doing due diligence in the public interest. Thank you. I know that you were prepared ahead of time with this question, so I'm glad that you
So
have that.
the Millbrook Marsh Nature Center Feasibility Study Working Group has, as the members, Rick Barbeau, Dr. Rick Barbeau from Penn State University, also a member of the Millbrook Marsh Nature Center Advisory Committee, Carla Stilson, College Township Council, Jerry Northridge, College Township staff, Amy Kerner, College Township staff, Andrew Gutbertlet from Penn State, Kathy Madison from the Parks and Rec Authority, Melissa Kaufman, the supervisor of Millbrook Marsh Nature Center, Jim Carpenter, the Center Region Parks and Recreation Manager, Pam Salakangas of the Center Region Parks and Rec.
Thank you so much. That was the working group, and then do you happen to have the advisory? I did try to find it, and I couldn't find it online. Do you know who the advisory committee is made up of?
I can pull that up and get that for you, but.
Okay, thank you, thank you. That would be great. And these are just, I don't know, because this is sort of as Bill has said, in the authorities meetings, we are playing a little bit of catch up now that it's budget time and we're trying to educate ourselves. So appreciate your help with that. So I think our questions relate to the scope that's going to be proposed, and then who it'll be proposed by, and then the next steps to determine the scope, because on a project of this scope, it's important at the outset to assess how much you want to invest before you invest in design build. So when I reviewed what I understood to be the forthcoming results of the study, as I understood it, one of the components that would be more expensive would be, I'm going to call it expansion, I don't know if that's accurate, but like an area where there's going to be like a Clomar, Lomar. I know I'm talking Dave Modricker's language when I say Clomar, Lomar. There's going to be like a thank you so much, like a DEP permit process. So before we begin to embark on something that has tens of thousands of dollars associated with it, I'm trying to make like a place where we can understand what we're being tasked with deciding. So I appreciate you being here just before the final results are available. And I know that we'll look forward then to the results of that study in the parks, the joint meeting with the Park Capital Committee and the Park Authority, so that we can take a step back and really understand the scope, and then also understand the Penn State commitment when we embark on such a significant investment into one of their assets. Looks like I talked long enough for you to actually find the answer. Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
I have a few questions.
Okay, so the members of the advisory committee for 2022 include Kathy Madison from the Parks and Recreation Authority, Tamia Kramer from Penn State University, Deb Nardone from Clearwater Conservancy, Deidre Bauer from the school district, Trevor Birkenholtz from Penn State University, Joanna Sedgwick from the Center County Historical Society, Steve Swinski, Bald Eagle Archaeological Society, the representative from the Borough of State College is vacant, Shavers Creek Environmental Center is Doug Wenzel, and then members at large, Dr. Rick Marbo, Jennifer Arndt, Ian Salada, Molly Hetrick, and Chris Hurley. So there can be up to 8 members on that. If Ferguson Township's interested in recommending somebody to serve on that, I'm sure we would be interested in considering that suggestion.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And Lisa, I believe has
Just a couple of questions.
I don't know if you,
Well, first, just
maybe a
about
trip
that,
back.
did you list somebody from CRPC? Because there used to be a representative from CRPC.
On Millbrook Marsh.
I did not see that.
So I didn't know if they changed that, because I was that representative when I was on CRPC. I served
We-
on the advisory board, so I didn't know if that,
I don't see that.
Oh, okay.
Listed, no.
Yeah, we kind of made a decision to change that one after you had left. We essentially had no takers.
Just a couple of questions. So what will be in the final report that wasn't in the attachment that we had?
Well, I've not been working closely with that, but, so I don't have an answer to that question, but we can certainly get that for you.
Okay, just curious, because there was a lot in there, so, because it had the cost estimates. And then, I guess, not a question for today, maybe, based on what we've heard so far. So my question in looking at what we were given in the attachment was, what really in those cost estimates was beyond reconstruction of the physical boardwalk that needs replaced? I couldn't tell, other than where it said boardwalk foundation, because there were bridges, grass paths, and things like that. So I guess that would be one question, and that goes back to scope. So when whoever is making the decision, which may be the park authority, I'm not sure, so what scope they decide on.
Right, I know there are 2 things that have been discussed in terms of scope, potentially adding additional trails and areas to the boardwalk. That may or may not be recommended, given the final cost that could be involved with that. But there are some areas of erosion, and there's a more technical term for that is escaping me at this point, but to prevent future erosion and wearing away at the areas of the marsh and the foundation areas where the boardwalk will have foundation set. I think there was some restoration that was being recommended as well for that. But most of this I'm picking up from some of the same meetings that Bill's gone to, so this may be in Bill's report as well.
Who is going to make that recommendation? You talked about a recommendation, and I think that we're still a little bit mystified by the governance structure here.
So,
Is it facilities,
Melissa-
or is it going to be park authority, or is it going to be either of the 2 committees we just detailed?
Melissa Kaufman will be, as a staff for the Nature Center, will be presenting this to the committees along with other COG staff next week when we convene those meetings. So, but hopefully we'll all get a chance to get that report in advance to read that before that meeting.
I want to maybe flesh out a little bit about what you're asked as a question and what I've also posed in a different way in some other meetings. In fact, at the last month's Joint Facilities and Park Authority meeting, the feasibility study number 1, which is finished and available. I was at the Park Authority meeting. I remember, Bill, we were at a park for the meeting. I was there when that was presented. And the way it was presented, instead of the budgets that you see in the current attachments, they're presented in they call it like a unit cost. Layperson, Dave, Modricker, don't be horrified if I butcher this language, but they're presented in like a per unit cost. But the feasibility study number 1 was presented like, here's this portion of the project, and here's all the add-on portions of the project, which is like a different, and then if I understand correctly, something happened in the facilities meeting where they were like, we want to do everything. And then in feasibility study 2, then it was sort of like discussed in a manner that was a unit cost. So it became more difficult to distinguish, and we remember this part of the kind of conversation from Whitehall, you know. So, right, so when we get to that presentation in the joint meeting, in the authority joint meeting, coming up in 9 days, can we make sure that somehow those unit costs are mapped onto the map so we can actually address the scope? Because I don't know if we're ready to do this process in the same way that Whitehall was done, like, here's the scope that an external agency has decided for you, and then you're going to either fund it or not. I think we want to have more of an understanding of the scope and be able to make a comment on the scope. So I think that the absolute essential information at that joint meeting is going to be able to understand the costs in relation to the scope as it's being presented. Back to you for questions.
And then I just wanted to talk about the cost estimates briefly. And I watched the discussion about the design build. I'm not even going to get into that because that was pretty complex. But the estimates are so different, the 11 million and 6 million. And my understanding was the only difference is the contingency is built in.
Oh, the 20% contingency.
So is that correct? Is my understanding correct?
We'll try and answer that question at the meeting next week.
Okay.
I wasn't told we were going to get into this level of detail or.
Okay, well, do you know what, that's fine, and I can just state my questions for that joint meeting, and so, because I think my questions are pretty general, and probably things that other people who are not either on facilities with Parks Authority or Parks Capital will need explained moving forward. So I'll just say, the other question I had was in regards to the CIP estimates. It was, and we talked about this during the budget meetings, $2 million was allocated in 2023 for the boardwalk, and then $1.5 million in 2024 for the boardwalks. That was $3.5 million, and that was just a few months ago. And so now the lowest cost estimate is almost double. So that was striking, because I hadn't, like I said, I'm not on those committees, so I hadn't been in those meetings. So if there was some lead up to that big jump in the number, I wasn't aware. So I guess that would be a question that maybe can be posed at that upcoming meeting. And then phasing, if that's an option, in the scope decisions. And then if there can be some kind of clear timeline of when, I know you said February, and then, prior to that, after that, because it's such a large number that it's going to be, I think, decided in 23.
Right, and that will have to be a decision made collectively by everybody, especially those funding the project, because there's a limited window of time for construction of this project. So we would need to certainly make a funding decision and prioritize whether we can even keep the boardwalk operational, or whether some or all needs to be closed pending the reconstruction. So that's certainly a factor. And I don't think anybody wants to feel pressured to make a decision, but that, the safety issues that Bill mentioned may force more closures of more sections of the boardwalk before we get to that point. The other thing that in terms of phasing, given the equipment that would need to be mobilized to put the piles in and those sorts of things, I'm not sure whether that will be feasible, but we can certainly ask that question.
I'm gonna
Thanks.
just jump in here for a second. So I heard you mention something about the timeline to make this kind of a funding decision. And I guess I'll say now, again, to receive any feedback from my board members specifically, but in previous discussions, it's really been highlighted that we value greatly this asset, but so does Penn State, and so do a lot of visitors, and so does Clearwater Conservancy, who has a significant conservation easement that they are obligated by law to maintain. So, this asset of shared responsibility and shared benefit has been recently discussed in a different way than it has been previously discussed. And what I'm talking about is just massive, massive investments of taxpayer dollars into a private facility. So this boardwalk was previously installed at a time before Clomar-Lomar existed, I'm quite sure, and by volunteers. And it became the property of Penn State in a long story. And now we have a lease that we're going to maintain it. Maintaining it at this point involves many millions of dollars. And it's a policy question that we have to answer how we're going to go about maintaining the shared asset. Because I don't think that the solution, now or long-term, is that the automatic response to multiple bodies that have advised us that we need to invest all this money is an automatic investment. And I know you're not saying that, but I just want to be really clear that in the past, the discussions have been, we really support this asset and we want to support this asset, but we have to make sure that other people are at the table understanding what that investment means for the taxpayer. So.
Right, and I
Yeah.
think one of the things that may be a time factor in terms of determining the funding plan is figuring out what grants this project would be eligible for. Having a partner like Clearwater Conservancy enables the potential for application for grants that the COG or the authority may not be eligible for, but they may, or we may be eligible for more funds in collaboration. There may be transportation and trail-related grants. So these are conversations we've had at the staff level, but some of it will need to be determined once we have a full scope of the project. But I have talked with our transportation staff in Central Region Planning already to see what might be options. So, I don't think there's anybody who's expecting this would all fall on the municipal shoulders.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing that. I want to just give one final kind of thought. So in my research and preparation for considering this as being brought before us, I needed to look into the Millbrook Marsh because I had heard from a lot of people the value of it for stormwater for Penn State. And I didn't understand what that meant in a more detailed perspective. And so the only additional thing I have to share is that a lot of the discussion about the deterioration of the boardwalk facility has been based on things like critical weather events through climate change. But what I found too is that there is some impact of the development of the east end of campus on this as a stormwater facility. And one might think that there would be the possibility that if there were additional development on the east end of campus, which I don't know, that there would be an impact of stormwater on this. So when I'm talking about the lease and the long-term implications of managing this, we see it as a marsh that's an educational facility, and so do some of the professors, but it's also seen as a stormwater facility that serves the needs of development on the east end of campus. So basically, what we're doing is we're encumbering ourselves to bear the burden of that development through support of a very large stormwater basin that's in the form of just a beautiful marsh. And anybody that knows me would know that I'm a fan of that. I, again, just want to make sure that all of the correct team players are at the table when we're talking about the value of this asset and who it serves. So thank you so much. Appreciate that. Looks like our Park Authority representative is up to comment on this.
I've been listening to this conversation now as it's gone on, and a concern comes to me that you know, I can't speak for the authority, but I can speak as part of the authority when I say that some of your conversation has to do with putting together some figures by a meeting in 9 days. And I've got to tell you that our staff is currently knee-deep in Whitehall Road and its programming and where it's going. And so the feedback, some of the feedback that you've mentioned in the last half hour just isn't going to happen, I don't believe, between now and 9 days from now. Just in terms of time. I don't know who's going to do it.
I'm sorry, I should not be laughing. That's a little bit of nervous laughter right now. I concur,
Okay.
and therefore, as an elected official elected to represent the interests of the people, I would say then that should not be brought before the elected officials who are surely going to have those questions. And if that is the case, then this should not be a matter for discussion at this point in time, and it should be put forth in a timely manner, whereupon all of the information that we need to make that decision is before us.
And this is one of the things, Madam Chair, that I wrestle with as a representative from the township. You and I have spent the last 6 years together in one capacity or another. And one of the constant themes that you put forward has to do with transparency. And transparency versus timing becomes a real juggling act. Do you wait until the timing is right before the transparency starts to come forward? And that's a difficult decision, and one which I have been wrestling with over the last couple of years. And because I want to be transparent with every board, all of the electeds. But on the other hand, sometimes the timing doesn't work out, given the extent of the staff that we have available to do the work. And I think all of us can recognize.
We recognize that.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that we manage that, but when there's $11 million that's been put out there, it brings questions to mind. And it's okay if they don't get answered in the joint meeting, as long as they're acknowledged as a starting place before we move on to the next stage, right? We all accommodate for these kinds of things. It's just that we don't want to be faced with a motion when we don't have the answers that make us feel comfortable to do that. And we also don't really, we put really valid concerns on the table, and it's important for them to be acknowledged so that the narrative isn't put out there that we don't support this asset, because we do. It's the how that now we are faced with an investment of this size that we have to work out, and it takes a pause sometimes. Sometimes you have to pause.
Okay, and all I'm saying is the staff that is assigned to do the kind of work, and the committee that is assigned to do the kind of work that has been suggested isn't able, I don't believe, and shouldn't be tasked with this in addition to the Whitehall Road project, which is a major operational it's underway. And so I just wanted to caution that we may not have some of that data and some of that information.
All right. I feel like at this point, I feel uncomfortable because I think that it's an executive director thing to task the staff. So I appreciate that caution. But now my hat is going on, like, stay in your own lane, Laura. And like, maybe I'm feeling like this is not my lane to talk about tasking staff.
Okay.
My lane is to talk about what I need to make a good decision. I'm just like, right, I'm gonna acknowledge that. So
That's fine.
I appreciate those concerns. We brought our concerns out, and you know what? Just having this conversation here, initiating this conversation, getting some things out on the table that are important topics, I think is of great value for us. And
And
I
I agree.
appreciate your being here and
I
present
agree
for
with
that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Beth.
you. And Mr. Miller, would you care to say anything more than hello? Please step up to the podium.
Wasn't actually planning on saying anything at the beginning. This discussion is
Well,
one to have
it happens.
some background in.
Thank you.
So I did want to make a couple comments, not about the funding or the cost or anything on that, but about the number of entities involved in this. Basically, I think one thing you're going to come up against in terms of trying to say all these entities are involved is they're all involved in so many different ways. What I'm thinking of is Penn State's involvement as a stormwater facility is not at all related to the public access part of it, and actually may actually be somewhat opposed to that, because building on it may be something that does not help their or benefit them. I'm not saying it's not a good idea to talk to them and try to convince them that it is in their interest to increase public access. But I think that you have to keep in mind that really the public access and, use of it as a park type of thing really is something that was taken on by the municipalities. I will say that there were some people that objected to the whole idea from Ferguson Township 20-some years ago. But it has proved to be a very valuable thing. I don't know if it's valuable at the $6 million or $11 million level. Fortunately, I don't have to make that decision. So, but I did just want to point out that, it has a lot of different uses, and Clearwater's involvement with the Fen, I mean, they could be brought in as part of the public outreach part of it, but that's not part of Clearwater's involvement right now, which is essentially to protect that Fen from any damage. And that's the extent of an easement, or actually I think it's actually an ownership on the Fen part itself. But their actual involvement right now is to prevent damage to it, not to provide public access. And I'm not trying to convince everybody that it's in their interest to join in with public access. But I just wanted to point out that there are not just a number of involvements, but totally different involvements that aren't all the same thing.
It's a beautiful thing to point out, and it's extremely important, and if I didn't emphasize it enough,
But I just wanted to put that in as something to think about as you go forward.
Yeah, so then my question is immediately, I'm pretty sure I saw that Fen in the budget for feasibility study too. And so I'm not interested in putting the taxpayer dollars into that Fen if that's a Clearwater job. So I just am so unclear on the aspects of it that we need to kind of figure out who might be investing in which aspects of it. So it's spot on, as usual, Mr. Miller.
That's all I wanted to put in.
Thank you.
Just keep that in
Thank
mind
you.
as the discussion goes
Thank
forward.
you. Thank you.
Competing aspects of it.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
And,
Steve.
what is that? I don't know. I'm not going to try to figure out the word. My aphasia is running high tonight. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions on Millbrook Marsh Boardwalk? You've kind of gone through the gamut. Okay, let us please then go ahead and move on to our COG committee reports. Facilities Committee. Ms. Stevens.
We just had this morning, and I do have to say, I was expecting a big discussion on Whitehall Regional Park, and that got pulled, as you might know. There was another discussion, sorry,
It was a lot.
it was a lot, about the COG building and maybe adding in some verbiage for this. And this is where I would like you all to take a look at it and decide. So Harris Township had proposed some sort of additions to it, and it was in the agenda, and I'm sorry, I don't have it with me. Again, it would probably be in my report later, but suffice to say is there was a vote about adding these in, and I voted against it, only they explained it well. There was some terms like enterprise operations that is a financial term that I wasn't familiar with, and while they explained the procedure, so basically things I can't wrap my head around, I'm just gonna always vote no. And then there was also some language about rent such as, and such as was what I kept getting hung up on. And because I kept thinking, well, if this is a lease, if I would never sign a lease that said you have to pay utilities such as electric and water, because in my mind, that's not clear. You know, and so I wanted it to be clear and spelled out. So if you all would take a look at that so that when we vote on it at general forum, I believe that I was the only dissenting vote. So it will be coming on to, I believe, executive next, but probably ultimately. So if you would give me some feedback, executive, and then give me some feedback on your thoughts on that, or if I'm just way off, and I welcome that. So, and then just some discussion with the new Kathy, I cannot remember her name, Kathleen, the new facilities coordinator, about some long-range planning for facilities and informational discussion that was quite nice. So, and that was about it, but I will write up notes that can be in our next agenda. If you have any questions, please reach out to me.
Thank you so much. And I did have some questions that resulted from the discussion on the COG building. So just in terms of process and how it's Thanksgiving and we have meetings and it's budget time and we already have, is this week, next week, lots and lots and lots of meetings. This is maybe gonna come back again to us. I'm not sure when, but now we have some additions. Do we have to have it reviewed now by our solicitor? Because what has happened now, we were prepared to vote. We voted yes on a document that was reviewed by our solicitor. Now, another municipality has proposed some amendments. We voted no, but the majority voted yes. So now it's going to go to executive. I'm imagining as COG does it, even if I vote no based on it not being addressed and then moving forward, it's gonna go for a vote. Are we gonna have our solicitor review it before? Are we gonna vote no just on not having time for our solicitor review this new language? Should you and I confer afterward to figure out a path forward?
Is that a
It's
question?
it's kind of the first I heard that this is gonna now continue with an amendment.
From
So
the
it's-
facilities conversation, I have not considered advancing it to the solicitor. Generally, that would be a COG matter that would be further discussed and addressed with general forum.
But our solicitor did review that COG building agreement, I think. Anyway, do you want to catch up maybe after the meeting to talk more? I guess it's going to go to COG general forum
It'll go to-
this month.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions based on facilities? Okay, moving on, executive committee. This would have been last month's executive committee. Lisa?
I attended that. There really isn't anything to report on that wasn't discussed at general forum.
All right, great, thank you.
Can I just
Yes,
add in a public
please.
safety? So our public safety committee was canceled, but I did get an email today. I think you might not have checked your emails, and I forwarded you. There was a discussion about, we are supportive of a fire extinguisher training system. It's a $14,000 purchase. Were we supportive of advancing that? It wouldn't be purchased until early next year, and that's when the funds would go, but if we don't purchase it, there would be a price increase. I think it's sort of, kind of like what we did with the fire truck, kind of, but, and I did write back that I was supportive of advancing that, because I don't know if you've ever seen the fire extinguisher training. They had it at Lion Bash. It was great, and it was hugely popular, and so I was very supportive of it. And anyway, I just wanted you to know that that came as a separate letter. I did forward it to you, and I
Yes, thank
did
you.
offer my support from
Thank you.
Ferguson Township too for that. And it will be advancing to finance and executive.
Yep, thank you. All right. Okay, then moving on to staff reports. Any question for the manager, or the public works director, planning and zoning? Any questions for staff at this point in time? Anything staff wants to convey? Okay, seeing none, we're gonna move on to unfinished business. First up, a public hearing on an ordinance of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, establishing Chapter 21, Streets and Sidewalks, Part 6, non-tower small cell wireless communication facilities in the right-of-way, and amending Chapter 27, zoning, Part 7, supplemental regulations, Section 710, tower-based wireless communications facilities, and Part 11, definitions, Section 1102, definitions. Introduced by Ms. Jenna Wargo, Director of Planning and Zoning, with us via Zoom this evening. Welcome, Jenna.
Thank you. So the Small Wireless Facilities Deployment Act, as we call Act 50, was signed into law on June 30th, 2021. It was drafted in unison with Pennsylvania Municipal League and telecommunications providers. Legislation provides for fair and equitable treatment for small wireless facilities and comprehensive protections for the municipality to ensure proper maintenance of the public right-of-ways. So after further review by the Township Solicitor, staff has updated the draft amendments and included those red line drafts in the agenda that the board received at their September 6, 2022 meeting, and authorized the advertisement of a public hearing for November 1st. Planning Commission reviewed the draft amendments at the September 12, 2022 meeting and recommended approval to the Board of Supervisors. Provided with the agenda is a copy of the ordinance as provided and reviewed by all local, regional, and county reviewers, and is advertised for a public hearing. The document has been made available for inspection at the Township office. Staff's recommendation is that the Board of Supervisors adopt the ordinance.
Thank you so much. This is a public hearing, so we will go ahead and open this up to the public. Would anyone care to comment at this time on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and move on to board questions and discussion. Does anyone have any questions for Jenna? All right, seeing no questions, do we have any discussion? Are we ready to entertain a motion?
I'm ready to entertain a motion.
Let's entertain the motion. Who would like to give that?
So I would recommend that the Board of Supervisors adopt the ordinance as the recommended motion stated in the agenda packet.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
This is Patty, I'll second.
Thank you. Going to ask for further discussion. All right, this is going to be a roll call vote. Ms. Martin, would you please give us the roll call vote? Thank you.
Yes, this is a roll call vote for ordinance 1080. Ms. Gennetti?
Yes.
Ms. Strickland?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Williams? Okay, thank you.
The motion passes unanimously. And we'll go on to new business. First up, we have our consent agenda. We've got some voucher reports, some contracts, and a letter. Would anyone care to pull anything before I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda is listed.
Do you have a second?
This is Lisa, I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Let's go ahead and move on to
the 2023 Center Region Council of Governments budget. This will be first introduced by Ms. Martin, and we do have Finance Director of COG, Joe Vigilone, and Executive Director of COG, Eric Norberg, here with us to answer any questions then. First to you, Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the October 24th COG General Forum meeting, the draft 2023 COG summary budget was reviewed and referred to the member municipalities for consideration. Comments are due back to COG Executive Director by November 17th. Eric Nordenberg, Executive Director of COG, and Joe Vigilone, COG Finance Director, are here with us this evening to review and respond to any questions the board may have. Provided with the agenda packet are links to the summary budget as well as the detailed budget as presented and approved by the COG Finance Committee. And with that, I'll just yield to Joe, Mr.
Thank you
Vigilone,
so much.
and Mr. Nordenberg.
Thank you. Please, welcome, and thank you. Welcome again.
Good evening again. Over the past month and a half or so, the Finance Committee has conducted an extensive review and evaluation of the COG budget. The budget process got underway in the spring as COG staff developed the program plan that was reviewed and discussed by all of the municipalities. In fact, I remember being here for that discussion and feedback by the board as was done with each of the municipalities. The budget, when it was constructed and all put together with all of the things that were supported by at least most of the municipalities, came in over budget, over what was deemed financially feasible for the municipalities to absorb in this time when the economy is tighter and inflation is hitting all of us, particularly the municipalities in the COG. So the Finance Committee at its first review session asked staff to go back and prepare what was deemed a status quo budget to have no more than an 8% increase. And so staff worked very hard at that, and at each session, each agency presented a much reduced budget that was basically the 2022 operations and facilities carried into 2023. And so we're at a point where the scope and impact on the municipalities is much reduced from what was originally delivered based on the program plan development. So the Finance Committee did a huge task at reviewing all of those recommendations, and the final results are included in the summary budget, which was mentioned, and we appreciate the participation of both Chair Danini, who's a member of the Finance Committee, but Lisa Strickland, who is filling in quite a bit for those meetings. And as I said, those were some very long and involved meetings, and I'm sure both of you can comment on some of the things that are in the summary budget or the process. But with that little introduction, Joe and I are here to answer any questions that you have. And again, as your township manager mentioned, the feedback, consensus feedback, like we have done for other budget review and program plan review, would be due back the 17th, I think. So the Finance Committee can finalize all of the feedback from the municipalities. So.
Thank you. Quick clarification then on that, specifically for process. After we give our comments, it'll go to the finance, will it go to the COG General Forum this month?
Yep. Both Finance Committee, then Exec, and then General Forum this month, correct.
Okay. I see, okay. So the Finance Committee meeting is what date?
The 18th, Joe?
Okay, right, because we changed the way they roll out so we could make sure we have all of our comments. Okay, and then you'll compile all the comments from the various municipalities. And then, so when we went through this process with the CIP, I think it was at that point that I had attended that finance meeting thinking that we were going to talk about the comments that we got from all the other municipalities, but we didn't talk about it, we just moved it forward. So this time at finance, will we talk about what we say tonight with our colleagues? Or will we just then move it forward to the general forum where there's 6 of us, where we also won't talk about it because at that time we'll be passing it. Will we be passing it at that time? Theoretically, will we be asked to be passing it at that time?
I'll let Joe fill you in.
Thank you. And you know I'm referring to that beautiful document that you all have created and we're continuing to refine. So we're just kind of like figuring out our orientation, that spreadsheet of the budget process. I'm gonna love it if you just go and you get that right now. You don't have to, but if you did, that would be amazing.
Joe didn't need it all.
I'm sure. So when it goes to finance, after we talk about it and everybody's comments from the whole region go to the finance committee of COG, will we talk to each other about it or just move it forward?
At the Finance Committee, you are very welcome to talk about it. These are comments that are coming through, but they will mainly be coming as municipal comments into the to the Finance Committee. So they won't be pulled together into a matrix by staff or anything along that lines. Ferguson will talk to their peers on the Finance Committee about the items that they have or their comments on their letter to the Finance Committee. The committee should then resolve it, move it forward to exec, which I believe is later that day. And then they can discuss it too if there's further resolution be needed. And then on top of that, general forum then would theoretically resolve any of the open questions, any items in the endorsement of the budget that would occur on whatever day the general forum meeting is in November.
Yeah,
and then it gets
is that the
referred.
20th?
Yeah, and then it gets referred to the municipal budgets for adoption within their regular budget.
Okay. All right, thank you. So what I am hearing, and I'll reflect back to you, is that if we have a comment, which we haven't got to yet, if we have a comment, we don't need a majority of other municipalities to have the same comment to be able to talk about it in that forum. The representative, myself or the alternate for that day, I'm not sure, will be able to say, hey, here's a few things, let's talk together about these few things that we have.
And that has been processed, yes, and that's why we deliver the letter.
Thank you.
Now, some of the letters come in at the last minute. I don't believe Patton Township is meeting until Wednesday the 17th, which is a reason why the meeting has been moved from the 11th from the 11th to the 18th, is to allow all municipalities time to meet.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for walking us through that. Okay. I'm going to just dive right in. I'm not getting the detailed budget to come up for me right now, but I've got the summary budget, so I can use that as a guideline. My plan for this was to just hit each section of the budget and entertain any comments that the board might have. So I thought I'd just kind of use that as our guideline to kind of head through there. So I guess I'll just, I'll mention that in our CIP comments, we had a few comments on the structure of the CIP and the budget and the process and that kind of thing. So I'll be continuing to put those forward, but we don't have to take any time on them. But I'll then entertain any general comments or questions, generally on the first few sections that are general of the summary budget, or just general questions. Anything there? Okay.
Would it help for you to have a hard copy?
That would be great. This is a brick tonight, and
Well,
yeah, I have all
this is
these
easier
things,
than
and
the
then
phone.
this is wonderful. Thank you. It's so much better. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay. Yes, and there's this great table of contents too there. So let's go ahead and start with office administration. If we don't have any general, so I do like to point out that I appreciate the tables that you do. Finance Director Joe Vigilone. I appreciate these tables, the summaries. That's really a very helpful tool for us. Let's go to the administration budget. Mr. Vigilone also sent in advance, I don't think it's in our packet, but the detailing of what has transpired that Mr. Norenberg did touch on.
that full list of things that have been changed. So we can comment on those too as we move through if we would like to. So, administrative budget. Anything anybody wants to comment on in this section? Is this where we find the long-range long-range facilities study? Or is it not in this budget and it's just in the CIP?
For this year, it will be staff-driven, working with the committee, and so there wasn't funding inserted into this to 2023. But as was outlined by Ms. Bisco this morning, you know, the committee would work with staff to identify priorities, and if consulting was needed for specific topics, we would target that for the following fiscal year.
Okay. We've asked these kinds of questions of our own staff when we kind of hear answers like that, like, would it be better for us to provide support? Because I believe that, saying it in front of everybody, our board strongly supports that endeavor. So would it be helpful for us to make a comment and or suggest any actual support? Or are you as staff comfortable with that approach where you don't have any actual support identified for that very important effort?
I think we're comfortable for now because Kathy has done this kind of work in the past. But I think we recognize this is not going to be something that is completed in 1 year, and so this will be an approach where we want to take the appropriate steps in planning as she outlined this morning and be ready to identify consulting that might be needed in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else want to make any comments on office administration?
Maybe.
Okay.
Is this, I'm trying, because
It's okay, you can kind of put it out there, we'll find out if it.
Good.
It's okay, we're gonna be casual.
Because my question is about the insurance reserve, and so I don't know if that's under here or a separate section. $100,000 was transferred out of that, and I was just curious about the replenishment of that fund. What is typical, and then was that a significant factor in decreasing that municipal contribution percentage?
The answer is yes and no. And the reason why yes and no is it would be, but we're looking at this perhaps changing the format in connection with the comp and class study as to how we look at and approach the insurance reserve budget. Now, the insurance reserve budget has been done over years to smooth large increases. And part of the reason for that is a portion of it goes to the employees, a portion of it goes to the COG budget. So it sort of does some leveling if we could draw more out of the insurance reserve if need be to try to keep if there's a 10 or 15% spike in health insurance. For this year with a low increase of health insurance, 1.2%, it wasn't significant. But there have also been some questions about how COG has handled this previously, which was agreed to by the Finance Committee, years ago, in terms of using it as a smoothing and going back and forth between the employee and the employer. And there may be an opportunity with a reset for the class and comp study, if that were to be put in as a way to perhaps view this budget a little bit differently and utilize some of this fund balance to sort of offset some of the impacts of the comp and class study. So to be clear, the answer is yes and no.
That's a good answer. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. And then one other question that I'll ask here, just because I'm not sure, I'm trying to bring up the list of
Oh, good, yeah.
noted changes. So my question is, the IT improvements, the security risks that were recommended for improvement. I noticed in, here we go. In the summary budget, there was just a list of things that were added back in from the recommended cuts. And I know that some of those recommended IT improvements were added back into certain departments. My question is, were there any of those security recommendations that weren't added back in, that were just missed? Did we restate all of those security recommendations to the different agencies? Because I see some of them were highlighted here. Fire operating, the active adult center, maybe I'm missing something else. So I just wanted to know that that wasn't, there was nothing
Still
missed
left out.
there, yeah.
I certainly hope not. That was my big fear over the past
Okay.
month, but the idea was to put everything back in. I do know it was heavily focused towards the network infrastructure components of it, and there was some things in there for multi-factor authentication, MFAs, and then some other just general security backups and policy development.
Oh, because I guess the general, or the larger portion maybe had to do with admin, and then there were some off-site things, and that's why those were highlighted. Okay,
And
thanks.
So if I could add, in terms of hardware items, as you mentioned, those were identified as the highest priority. And when the 5-year study was prepared, they gave us a phasing plan and identified a few things to tackle this year. The multi-factor authentication is one of those things that we're working on right now, and things to be done by quarter in each of the next 4 years. And so we have the hardware replacements that are necessary back in, but there was also funding recommended for some other projects, and that was scaled back, I think, with the plan that we would tackle what we could with that amount of money with the staff at the State College Bureau IT, and then potentially come back if we needed more funding or as we went along, a potential budget adjustment. But we did not get all of that back in. I think the amount that was in initially, 40,000 was cut to 20,000, for example. But there's a lot to be tackled in the next few years in this program.
Thanks.
Thanks. I think it's a good time to say we are really appreciative of all the work that staff did when we did a pivot. I think that some of the things, obviously, we've been realizing that we have to be a little bit more strategic. So I think it's a good time to maybe ask about, I had originally thought maybe that strategic planning was going to drive maybe that long-term facilities planning. But then we did some of the strategic planning, and it seemed like maybe we're not going to get into that depth. So even though it's not really budget, it kind of is administration, right? Because we're maybe setting a direction for the future about longer-term strategic planning of COG. Do we see that strategic plan feeding into that?
Yes. The strategic plan, a year ago, the general form adopted mission, vision, values, high-level goals, and one of the things that staff have been working on, and Bill mentioned earlier how stretched staff are with a lot of different things, but agency directors and I have been working on developing the strategies and tactics for each of those goals, and we're actually meeting tomorrow with the consultant that has been supporting us from Penn State University to go over where we are with that. And I'm hoping that within another month or two, we'll have something to take to the executive committee to review. And if I remember right, budget is mentioned 20 times in the list of all of the strategies and tactics. So as important as the budget review was this year, and I think it is going to be even more important in the coming years. So I think the strategic plan will definitely help drive that in the future.
Because what I'm actually headed towards is maybe us making a comment talking about how we value that process, like I'm not going to, should I call it a cap? I don't know what to call it. We value that process, but want to see it move forward with maybe some strategic discussions about what that cap looks like in the future, or how that allotment is determined. I'm not talking about the formula, but maybe that too. But I mean, more of a how we determine how we grow as explicated by the budget. And I know that we have that very long list of tasks for the finance committee that encumbers your staff time. So I'm trying to be strategic about that, and I'm trying to say maybe we want to make a comment that says, let's prioritize those discussions about how we prioritize to give staff some direction before we rapidly head into the next budget session. So I don't know if that was clear as a comment. I'm wondering if our board wants to maybe make a comment about prioritization, and I'm gonna call it a cap. I'm sensitive about using that word, in respect to how we strategically plan for costs and increases. I'm seeing heads nod, so if you can capture that as a comment, I think that's maybe our comment for office administration, if I haven't heard any other comments, because that's more of a directional setting kind of thing. Do you have any comments?
If I can.
Yeah.
The cap was referred to more as a guideline, in terms
Good.
for the budget to growth. And in 2018, I believe that's where the guideline was taken away. And the goal was you would bring us what you need, and then we would prioritize off of that. That's pretty much what was done with the initial budget that went out this year.
When you say you would bring us, sorry to interrupt, when you would bring us what you need, is that the committees of COG, is that we, is that who?
It was decided by the finance committee to not move forward and continue the cap guideline.
Right,
Rather to
okay,
bring
right,
forward
yeah.
what we would
Got
need
you, yes.
and what we're suggesting, and then they would prioritize at that point.
Got you.
There was a pivot this year in terms of what I heard from the committee saying, okay, we want to put some more structure, we want to
Right.
put some more priorities on
Right.
that.
Please
So-
don't make us prioritize what we wanted to prioritize. Please do it for us a little bit.
Exactly, and I think that's sort of the framework for the comment then would be to reinstitute the guideline and to
Thanks.
have, and I don't know if it's the finance committee, the general forum, the executive committee brings forward some sort of prioritization
Right.
structure
Right.
to help inform the budget.
Thanks. That, using the word guideline. Yes, any additional?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll
Yes,
just share that
please.
part of the conversations, I think when Supervisor Strickland was actually attending a finance committee, one of the conversations that I heard, at least from where I was sitting, was that certainly a prioritization exercise of some kind, which I think may have even been, recommended at one point. And so that, if I hear your comment correctly, I really think it's reflecting much of what was discussed and consensus was had on the finance committee working through with the COG agency staff to work through what a prioritization looks like. So it was my understanding that that would take place early on in the year.
Thank
It's
you.
just a matter of moving it forward.
Thanks. This is an interesting conversation. I swear I'm going to move us off of it in a second, because I do want, you brought something to mind. We do prioritize things in the finance committee, and in fact, it was a big task, and I brought it to this board. Y'all remember, I was like, hey, look at this big list, let's prioritize it. So I do want to clarify, that list has a lot of tasks of all shapes and sizes on it. Things that are tiny, tiny little things, and then big, 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 big things. And I am actually making this comment without even, I don't want it to go onto that list, because I'm saying, like, that prioritization is things for the finance committee to do. What I'm asking for this comment to be is, let's us COG think about what priorities we want to be explicated in our budget. And I'll just pull out one example, and then I'll move us off of this, and we have any unless we have questions. The idea of prioritizing public safety. What does that mean? I'm not 100% sure. I have my own ideas what that means. Let's talk about it as a group. Yes, Lisa, add England to.
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment, reflecting what Century said about that one particular meeting. And I think that was really the consensus of Finance Committee that day. And I also heard that in a lot of the CIP discussions, that prioritization as a long-term ongoing tool to help with all of these different budgeting decisions would be helpful. In that finance committee where we did that little prioritization exercise, those of us sitting there said, you know, our priorities, and they kind of meshed around public safety, taking care of what we have, long-term planning. That's a, you know, a 10,000-foot overview. And then it was the approach taken at that time that we're saying now, okay, send this back to the agencies so that they can, with their knowledge of what's kind of, you know, integral, what's
Okay,
connected, how they
gotcha.
can cut back to that, reach that 8% guideline. And then I think the other part of that is, back to that CIP discussion, using the committees to also outline priorities so that they're getting down from that 10,000-foot view of public safety. Okay, public safety,
Right.
you know you're the
Right.
top priority identified. Where in here, committee, can you
Right.
say, you know, fire operating, whatever, you know, that we need to do that in the parks? You know, look at the big picture outlined at finance committee or, you know, general forum and break it down there before it goes back to the agencies that have that real day-to-day knowledge of what can be cut and what
I
can't.
thank you for that, and then I'm gonna kind of crack a joke right now. So basically, we have to know all this by February. I'm like joking, but I'm reflecting on that spreadsheet that you have of our process, and like this input. Obviously, we're working toward a goal eventually in the future, but like for this year, it's like, what are our priorities so we can feed it into that CIP that's gonna start in April?
It's a 5-year budget process when I started in 2010, and it's, or 5-month one, and now it's looking like a 12-month one, so.
There you go.
You
It's
know,
we're
just,
always in budget.
you
There
know,
you go.
just improving and just doing different
Yeah.
things. You know, when I
Thanks.
started here, we didn't have a CIP at COG, so think about, you know, where that's come from.
Thank you so much. All right, let's move off of administration if we're ready. And then do you want to talk about we've got COG contingency budget. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Is that remaining the same? Has that been reduced through the process or?
Contingency was not touched.
Okay, thank you. Questions? All right. COG building capital budget. Anything you want to identify for us? Any questions that we have? Any comments?
From the building capital budget side, the one big change was we moved from a 2% reinvestment strategy back to a basically inflationary increase over what we had had. One of the questions that came out of the CIP and the longer term facilities capital reinvestment policy, best practice is 2%. We sort of had one of those discussions coming out of the CIP as to how do we get from where we are now to 2%, or is 2% even the number? Is it 1.5? Is it 1 3/4? Is it 2.5? And so without any real clear defined answers at this point in time, and having a budgetary increase like what we were having, it was elected to move that back to inflationary at this point in time and to keep trying to crack that nut.
So that would be then part of understanding the guideline that we want to provide. So we want to understand what percentage that we want to identify as a reinvestment strategy to keep our infrastructure up to its needed condition. Okay, very good, thank you. Any comments on capital budget? Thank you for doing that for now. Hopefully revisit that ASAP so we know more about what we want to do with that. Insurance reserve, we've already had a question for that. Anything else? All right, COG unemployment budget.
We decided in 2023 in connection with this budget to reduce the fund balance by $35,000 and transfer it back into various individual funds to offset municipal contributions. The main reason why the fund grew larger than what we anticipated due to needing to pay a number of fraudulent claims, which turned into credits, which turned into, needing to keep it liquid, but then a fund balance that was higher than anticipated when we got the credit off from the PA Commonwealth.
Thank you so much. Okay, Office of Emergency Management operating and contingency. Let's put them together. Anything?
Nothing notable.
Okay.
That was kind of
Okay,
level.
thank you. Code administration, new construction, existing structures, capital, all three. Anything to point out?
The main thing is a $4 per unit fee increase for rental housing permits, increase in the hourly rate for some of the staff time for some of the permit calculations and licensing calculations, the Bullseye fire extinguisher training unit that was mentioned earlier. So those are the notable things.
Thank you.
Tracer starts operation January 1st, so that's the big highlight for the year.
Wonderful. Thanks again for that, the work on the Tracer. And then just important thing to mention is that the committee that was created by code, by us and code, to analyze that need for that increase. And it was recommended by people that are in the industry that would be a good path forward in addressing the fund depletion they had experienced.
Correct. Yeah, we have, as you said, industry experts that are working hard, meeting with both Joe and myself, as well as COG staff in code, and really trying to chart a path forward that will provide good advice to the COG committees.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we are on to SCLO. We're going to take the operating budget first. Anything you want to highlight?
Yes, if you're looking at the operating budget on page 31, you will see a steady decline in the fund balance. The fund balance got increased in 2020 due to the payroll protection program loan that we had received. That was a nice infusion of cash into the budget. But as you see, we've been spending down that fund balance. And as you know, fund balance is utilized to offset municipal shares for the program. So that would just tell you that there will be, at some point, an increase to library coming to help, maintain the funding and different things along that lines, because we are actively spending down fund balance to as a way to control costs or increase costs of municipal shares.
Thank you so much. I'm going to highlight something about this. Does anyone have any questions about library operating? I just wanted to continue to follow the staff pay, the issue that I've been trying to follow for multiple years about who is the least paid staff in the COG. There was, at one time, there was a lot of, we were really working very hard to make a plan to bring library staff up to a certain point. There was some, anyway, where are we at in the staff wages for library? Are we in a good place yet? Are we still working on it?
Still working on it. I think that question was answered in one of the responses. I'm not sure if Joe brought it in his volume of, but there was a request for a comparison between the staff at the lowest levels and their staff both in the library and in various positions in Parks and Rec make up the 5 or 6, 7, 8 bottom lowest paid staff, mostly part-time, those that don't have benefits, that sort of thing. But one of the critical factors when part of the project that we're doing, the classification compensation study, is to look at developing a classification plan for our seasonal and part-time staff, as well as we're not just focusing on the full-time staff. So we should have some recommendations from that study. They are harder to benchmark when we're talking about those positions, because not every organization has those type of positions, but we are working on that. There is an increase for the pages that was budgeted for this year.
Okay.
Did that stay in there, Joe?
Yes.
I think that was part of that plan too.
Correct.
That incremental increase.
Right. So we're trying to get away from making those changes ad hoc, but really to have a plan going forward next year in the future for all of those staff to be fairly compensated.
Thank you. I know that, yes, so I know we try not to do things ad hoc, but I know for some period of time we were having some trouble with staffing with parks, and in an ad hoc way we lifted those wages to make sure we would be able to employ enough people to keep things running.
Right. This year we were successful in filling all of the part-time caretaker positions, lifeguards as well. So that strategy did pay off in helping get those positions filled.
Great. I noticed, thank you for jogging my memory about that, and I don't have it in front of me either, but I remember wondering where the mowers fell in that table, because I didn't see the people that mow the parks. I couldn't identify them on that table.
I think I took the top, or the 8 or 10 lowest ones, so that they would be referred to as park caretaker 1, I think is the lowest park maintenance employee, and I think those are seasonal, so I'd have to go back and look at that list and double check.
Okay, sorry, just a minute focus on that. So am I understanding that because it's a seasonal, it wouldn't ever be found on that table? Or maybe it was on there under caretaker and I didn't understand that meant mower? Or, I'm sorry.
Correct. Yeah, mower is not one of our titles.
So it would be caretaker that I would be looking for, so I'll go back and look at that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And the new, I think the title that's being proposed is maintenance technician. So I don't think that's on the list, but titles evolve.
In the future, okay. Thank you so much. All right. So anything else for SCLO operating? So should I ask right now about fund balance? So this year, we're not doing anything in terms of fund balance. You talked about fund balance, it's reducing, but I'm looking at the fund balance, I'm seeing it's where it is. And I'm thinking about the transition into January and how we don't give them our percentage of payment until the March or something to this effect. And we talked about a fund balance and establishing a fund balance. So when I look at the budget, then I say, oh, is there a fund balance to get us through January? So there is that fund balance. That's going to be sufficient. And that's the norm.
We'll handle the cash flow aspects of it, but since we have started here, and I will go for SCLO in that capacity, since I've started here, they've had a healthy capital fund balance, as well as at times a healthy operating fund balance. So that's carried us through. As you can see on both the operating and the capital side, between 2020 and the 2023 budget, you can see a trend in the same direction, which is not positive. So this is one of the reasons why we are talking with the municipal finance directors on fund balance policy. Right now, we're into fund balance policy with the finance directors doing their budgets, and it's squarely on my desk, and that's one of the things I've got to pick up in the next couple of days as I put this to bed and start moving forward on that again, so that it's ready to discuss with them coming out when they come out of their budget time frame.
So
But the fund balance
that.
policy has been moving forward with the Center Region Finance Directors.
Right, I guess, so I'm picking up where Mr. Miller left off on Finance Committee, trying to work with, and I'll move us through this, but the reason I'm asking is you brought up the fund balance being reduced, but I still see it as something that's gonna carry us through the first couple months. Like, I'm still trying to understand the need for an additional, and we didn't do it in this budget, but it's coming up as a conversation, so.
If you look at the library fund balance,
Yes.
you've got $101,000 at the end of 2023 in fund balance for library operating.
Got it.
And in library capital at the end of 23, you're looking at 264,000, just over 264,000. You add those two numbers together, and let's just call it $365,000. You divide that by, you divide the operating expenditures of $2.6 million by 6, because you would need to front 2 months if everybody pays on time. That's $400,000.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, math, for the math.
But
Thank
it's
you.
that's where we're starting to run
Yes, I
into
see.
and warn you,
Right.
and warn
Okay.
about that.
Right.
It's a balancing act. It truly is.
Okay,
And we've
thank
been
you.
blessed with having gangbuster for codes.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and then move, thank you very much, Joe, to the Center Region Planning Agency. Ms. Strickland doesn't need a recess, but I might like stall a little just in case she needs to ask any questions. So anything you wanted to highlight with the Center Region Planning Agency?
Just the active transportation plan was a new item for next year. It was taken out of the budget when the staff was asked to bring it in as a flat status quo budget. It will be a small cost $10,000 cost to the COG because of the match that we'll be getting from outside agencies. So that was returned to the budget as part of the conversation.
Okay. Do we need to comment that we approve of that return to the budget? Would that be helpful?
No, I think that was unanimous.
Okay, great, okay. That's what Ms. Strickland probably would have commented on. All right, any other thing with the planning agency? Okay. Center County MPO, I'm going to defer this till Lisa gets back. This is her area of expertise, and I'm sure if anybody has a question, it's probably going to be her. So we'll move on to Regional Refuse and Recycling Program budget. Anything you want to highlight first?
The main thing happening with refuse and recycling is preparing for the next bid for the service for the next 5-year period. So there will be surveying done, and there's some this is an enterprise operation, so there was no direct cost to the municipalities for that, but it's budgeted and planned so that we can survey residents as well as assess the scope change, if anything, for the refuse and recycling program for the next bid.
Thanks so much. One other thing that just came up, I don't know, in sort of peripheral conversations about this is the refuse and recycling rebate. So in addition to this being an enterprise fund where it funds itself, we get some sort of rebate based on our recycling rate, something to this effect. And then that rebate is used to offset a cost somewhere else. We had asked a question about what all can that rebate be used for. Currently, it's being used to set up recycling at the regional parks, but there's been a long time interest in organics recycling. And so just the question came up as to, the pilot project that the refuse and recycling had at the farmers market where they were accepting it, and then the idea that they have of making locations. So I guess the question is, and I kind of want it in a comment, so we sort of put it into the system of asking about this, what all could that rebate be utilized for, and how would that decision-making happen? It's sort of a policy choice, like in the future. Yeah.
And I'm going to defer to Eric on that aspect of it, but I do want to also put it into context. In 2020, we did not receive a recycling rebate, nor did we in 2021.
Oh.
We are not anticipating one in 2023, and we were surprised by one, which was $27,000 in 2022. So we didn't really know that it was going to be here until it showed up. So we had got them for, my first 5-10 years here, we got them pretty regularly, but then they went away, and I'm sure that there are people who can talk more intelligently on it than I can.
More questions don't need to be answered today.
Yeah, but I wanted to let you know that it's not something that we get every year
Gotcha.
or we anticipate getting in 2023.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. All right. So we skipped MPO, Lisa, to come back to
thanks.
it, just in case you had any questions.
Nope, I didn't have anything.
Okay. All right. Anything you
Thank
all
you.
would like to highlight for the MPO?
That was where the study was actually in the MPO budget.
Oh,
so
okay,
that's
the
where
active transportation.
That was
Yeah,
the main,
yeah.
main highlight.
Right. I remember that. Thank you. We keep mistaking that. Thank you. Regional Fire Protection Program operating. Anything you want to highlight?
The Public Safety Committee has been working with the fire director since the ESCI study was completed in 2020 to track data and monitor need for staffing changes and beginning to hire paid firefighting staff. And so the recommendation that came from the fire director based on trends for volunteerism was to begin to add hours for firefighters that can respond, particularly on time periods, mainly weekends here, when it is harder to get volunteers to be staffing and responding at the station. So funding is included. That was one of the things that was discussed and added back in by the Finance Committee. And so that will be developed in terms of how that will fit into the staffing next year. But the dollars were identified to be left to the director to put together that scope. And he has several options that has been worked through with the the team at the fire department.
Thanks. Whenever that study's mentioned, I always have to just sing the praises of Steve Bear's dashboard that he made, I think it was him, not the consultant, that, right, was a product of that. That's a way for elected officials and the public to really understand how that study is being implemented. And I just really appreciate that tool that he had created and how it just keeps us so on track and on the same page with the conversation, because we know that there are things coming down the pipeline that we have to be aware of there. So, questions? Yeah.
Just one comment relating to that. They had the volunteer stipends under maintenance maybe, or I think it was under maintenance. And so I'd made the comment of moving stipends to the personnel category. It just gives a better indication of what's being spent. And we know, based on Steve Bear's comments, that additional staff will be needed over the next few years, and it's not a small expense. So
That's a great idea.
I think just getting that number like a bit more reflective of what's actually being spent in labor would be helpful.
What do you think about that? Is that consistent with budgeting practices? Can we make a comment? I think that's right, because that helps an elected official understand the cost center.
And I'm not sure exactly where that has started. That was been before I even started here. It was just one of those things that just kept rolling over.
Sure.
I don't think there's any need for a comment because the finance committee's already said, please do
Great.
this, and we'll move it.
Great, thank you.
Fantastic. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to fire protection capital. Yes, please.
Inflation and supply chain are not our friend. It's been very, very rough right now with fire capital. The one good thing is we only have 3 large pieces of apparatus over the next 6 years. So you can see, starting with this year's budget, we're going to take an inflationary increase plus $40,000. We had thought about putting it at $65,000 and doing it over 3 years, but we realized that over 6 years we get it in the same place by raising it over $40,000 a year versus 3 years to $65,000, and that's just going to put us in a better place, a little more of a slower trajectory. But we were very lucky that we put in a lot of these purchases and a lot of our apparatus will fall in the next 5 years or so in terms of replacement, allowing us to smooth a little further than we would normally have been able to.
Good planning. Maybe a little bit of luck, I don't know. Thank you. The fire program capital budget includes, this is the question, does it include, I think it does, monies that are invested into assets that are owned by other municipalities? Example, the Patton Township Fire Station and the Borough Downtown Fire Station. Are they owned by COG, or are they owned by the municipal area where they're located?
The fire stations are owned by the individual municipalities, and they are maintained by COG, and there was an agreement in 2011, I want to say, I may be off a year, in which responsibility for the maintenance of those facilities does fall on the COG.
Mm-hmm. So when we were talking in facilities meeting, which I was there with Patty in the facilities meeting, we talked a little bit about, when we were talking about the COG building ownership. And Chair Frank said something like, because we want to own these buildings if we're going to be investing in them. Of course, I thought of Millbrook Marsh, but now later I'm also thinking of the fire stations. So we talked a little bit about how maybe this would be the next grouping of things that we would try to understand our relationship about. And I'm just using this moment to talk about it because, again, there's always time and money involved with anything that we want to do. This is coming down the pipeline. Is it going through facilities? Has that been discussed? We're already making investments, but we haven't had the conversation yet. Not that I don't want to make the investments, right? But we also here in Ferguson, we have 2 of the slowest response times in the region for fire, and COG provides that fire service. So we're trying to best plan jointly
for this very interesting way that we're providing the service, right? And then we're thinking about investing in these other municipal assets, but we kind of have to maybe invest in one of our own, and is the COG going to be a co-investor in that? So I'm really thinking down the line, but could we just, is there anything that you wanted to add, talk, give perspective on that kind of?
Yeah, I don't think that and I'm not gonna go into, owning versus renting or whatever, but with fire coming down the line, it's the interpretation of the existing maintenance agreements. They're pretty sparse, and they can be interpreted in different ways, and just making sure that everybody's on the same page in terms of what we're thinking about, what is defined as maintenance. Is it indoor, is it outdoor, is it more of a condo type of relationship versus a facility type of relationship? And we're just going to try to get on our same page because there is a lot of area for interpretation. I think it was mainly between the municipal managers and the COG, executive director and fire director at that point when it came through, if my memory serves. But that's sort of the idea is, okay, let's just sort of nail down the points and make sure we're all talking about the same things. And I think that's where he wants to go next with. I don't think it has to do anything with, new fire stations or anything along that lines. I think he's just looking for consistency in those documents, because we had talked about that before when I sort of did my start on the facilities committee a few years ago before it transitioned to Lou and then to Kathy.
Thank you. So I'll just bring one other aspect of this conversation into this particular dialogue, is that we had been talking about a storage facility, and we moved forward with a lease, right, for that storage facility. There was discussion at that time about the potential for a build, and it was preliminary, right? We've got a lease now, it's not, but it's still on the table, right, that we're talking about that joint build. And so then our fire system would be like, now we own jointly a storage building, but then each municipality owns their own asset. So from our perspective right now, I'm just trying to represent that in this grouping of ways that we provide fire service, it results in Ferguson Township having 2 of the slowest response times. And when I say that, I want to be clear, they are meeting rural standards for response. But what's not happening is that the taxpayers that are paying the same rate for the same services are not receiving the same level of service. And that's just something to think about. And so, of course, when I'm talking about a storage facility, I'm immediately thinking, how can we collaborate together and cooperate, that if down the road there is, a desire to have better service response out there, and also to collaboratively build maybe a storage building, maybe there's opportunity for us to co-own, invest together. There's a lot there that I'm putting on the table.
Sounds like a great topic for the long-range facilities plan.
Beautiful. Okay, can we ask that be considered as we move forward? It's something on our radar, and we'd like it to be on others' radar as well.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, and that brings us to Parks and Recreation budget. And I think based on the facilities conversation this morning, we're going to wait until there's more information. So I think we'll defer that until our next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay. Do we need a motion to defer that portion? Just a statement that we'll continue the conversation after we have some more information based on facilities this morning?
You could make a motion to table it for a future meeting,
Okay.
and certainly perhaps ask if you'd like to have them
Of course,
return,
you're invited
or
at any time. We don't want to burden you, but we would be delighted to have you, and it would be very beneficial. But I don't want to, again, I know that you have a lot on your plate. So do we want to entertain a motion to table this until a future meeting?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
All right, do I have a second?
Second, this is Patty.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, so now, do we want a motion to forward the comments that we currently have? Might as well get it over with. I'm sorry, that was inappropriate. We might as well, hang on.
it's gonna seal the deal. I don't know.
We'll have time to have all of them, because our next meeting is still before the 17th.
So do you want to just hold them until the
Yeah.
next, okay, that's fine too. All right, great. Looks like that's everything, unless there's any other. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your preparation. Thank you for the budget. Really appreciative. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have the Salvation Baptist Church Preliminary Land Development Plan. This will be introduced by Director of Planning and Zoning, Ms. Jenna Wargo.
Thank you. Provided with the agenda is the Salvation Baptist Church Preliminary Land Development Plan, last revised on October 19th, 2022. This land development plan is located at 3645 West College Avenue. It's tax parcel 24004-078. The parcel is approximately 60.61 acres. It's zoned rural agricultural and corridor overlay. This land development plan proposes a fellowship hall and garage totaling roughly 13,000 square feet. At the time of the original land development plan, a fellowship hall and garage were proposed adjacent to the church and was never constructed. Since it's been more than 5 years since the original land development plan was approved, a new plan is required. Staff has reviewed the resubmission and is recommending conditional approval of the plan. Provided with the agenda is a memorandum from myself dated October 26, 2022, describing the outstanding staff conditions. Planning Commission also reviewed this at their last meeting held in October and recommended approval to the Board of Supervisors. Staff's recommendation is that the Board of Supervisors conditionally approve the preliminary land development plan. And I'm happy to answer any questions about this. See if I can show the area in question. This was formerly known by most as the Russian Baptist Church. So we have 4526 straight up top here. Yeah.
Thank you, Jenna. So let's start with a motion. Sorry to surprise you all.
Let's see, this is Patty. I move that we conditionally approve the motion listed in the agenda for the Salvation Baptist Church land development plan.
And that would be subject to the conditions that are described. Yep, okay, and we have a
Yes.
motion. Thank you. And do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. Questions? I have a few questions. Anybody else have any questions?
I was just going to ask if there were any concerns raised at the Planning Commission meeting. I didn't get a chance to watch it.
The biggest concern, most of the conversation at the Planning Commission meeting was related to the outstanding comment from the zoning officer on the floodplain designation. So currently it is designated as a Zone A and needs to be updated to Zone AE. That requires a letter of map revision from FEMA to be provided by the applicants. That's the last major comment. Otherwise, stormwater has been addressed, as well as any concerns from the township engineer.
Thank you.
Jenna, could you talk to us a little bit about that particular comment, but just kind of from more of a layperson's perspective? So my experience of that property is, I'm really concerned about development encroachment into the slab cabin area. And so obviously it's meeting the conditions of our ordinance or it wouldn't be in front of us. But I'm just interested, as this is our opportunity to understand what this is gonna, look like. What's the percentage of impervious? How much is it changing? Obviously, again, it meets the definitions of our ordinance. Is it changing? I'm sorry to maybe put you on the spot a little bit with this, and maybe Mr. Modricker is, I don't know. I still don't know who does what in land development, so don't let me put anybody on the spot here, but.
We all dabble at it.
Yeah, there's pieces and parts that belong to everybody, I'm sure.
And then I'll also ask about lighting. Are we gonna experience a big difference in lighting? You know, it's on my list of things to do, to change our lighting ordinance to be more dark sky friendly, but we haven't yet, so I know we're obligated to go with our ordinance that isn't yet. So just trying to understand the impacts, if you can, give us any information. Again, we're, you know, not saying that anything, I don't even know if there are additional lights, right? So I'm just asking kind of for that assessment.
Yeah, so the current proposal in front of us, the outstanding comment related to the floodplain zone A, and this is my basic understanding of it. I'm sure Dave can go into more detail than I on that. Essentially, what FEMA provides us is an estimation on our floodplain mapping because it's nationwide. So our ordinance, when we have a land development plan, our zoning officer requires that a special study be conducted to clearly define where that floodplain is. And mostly every instance, it actually decreases the FEMA designated area. But in order to amend those lines, a letter of map revision needs to be provided to FEMA in order to do that. And it's just for us to clearly identify where that floodplain is per lot when we have this opportunity to look at these land development plans. So where they are proposing the development is nowhere near the floodplain area. And that was kind of the back and forth between the zoning officer and the engineer on the project. We don't want to build in this, so why would we want to make it smaller? We're good with what it is right now. And we still wanted to have that further defined on this plan, only because we have experience in the past with this property, volleyball courts being built in the floodplain and driveways been put down through the floodplain, and that resulted in a couple of variances back in 2017. So we wanted that area to be clearly defined with this land development plan.
Thank you so much, because you're jogging my memory on why this was sticking in my mind, because I think what happened is there was an encroachment, and then sometimes things are made to be removed, and then other times they're not made to be removed. And then in this case, if I understand correctly, it was not made to be removed. It was not, and then it remained, correct?
Yes.
And that bothered me greatly, correct?
There.
Because it really is not intended to be built in that area. And so I guess that's why I'm being especially vigilant in this case, and I appreciate that staff was as well. Did anybody want to make any additions to that? I feel satisfied with that. Okay. And then the lighting question, I'm just referring to Pine Grove Mills small area plan, and certainly these.
I can answer that.
Oh, thank you.
I'm the engineer. I've
Oh,
been
come
here
on up, because of
through
CNET.
everything
Come
else,
on
waiting
over.
for this
Sure.
15 minutes.
We feel for you.
I think that their budget should be at the end.
Oh, that's.
I mean, that's obviously going to be something very long. There is no additional new lighting.
Okay,
It's,
thanks.
You know, there's going to be some outdoor lights next to the doors,
Gotcha.
but that's it. There's no
Thanks.
new parking lot.
No,
The
like,
parking lot is
sports
already
lights
there.
Wonderful.
The parking lot lights are there, the volleyball court lights are there. We showed
Thanks.
that even the volleyball court lights, we had that measured by a professor from
Still
campus,
won't
and
that-
it's not going, the light isn't going off of the property.
Thank you.
But that's all in the past.
Appreciate that.
Nothing new is being
Thank you,
done.
thank you. We're always just aware of change. We're like vigilant about the change. All right,
And as
thank
far
you.
as
Yes.
percent impervious, I don't know it off the top of my
That's
head, but
okay.
I think we're less than 20%. Because we're talking, it's a 26-acre property. The tax maps tell you that it's 60, but it's really not 60. It's 26 acres. I heard Jenna mention the 60 because that's what it
Yeah.
says. And I even told them, I said, are you paying taxes for 60 acres
Right.
instead of 26? And they said, no, we don't pay taxes because we're a church.
Oh.
So they're not
So
worried
they'd
about it,
never
so,
know if there was
because
a
I
tax
said, you
tax.
need to go to the county and get that reduced to the
It's
26
always
that
good
you
to
actually
know.
have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's
apparently
good advice, yeah.
it was subdivided out of a 60-acre property. So that 60 acres carried through.
Right. We've heard
When
this
that
kind of a
happened.
thing before.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Webbia and.
But anyway,
Always, yeah.
The percent impervious is very small.
Okay, thank you.
Compared to the property. Most of the property is on the other side of that, the floodplain.
Right,
And that, you know, they've got a community garden back there, and
right.
the rest is all trees and grass.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then also, I think combined with the information Jenna has shared, I'm feeling comfortable, and I do appreciate
Yeah.
you addressing it very
And
much.
it's also a very small increase in the impervious area from the original plan. The only thing that's new is the garage. The fellowship hall was included in the original plan. It was just put on there as future development. They thought they were gonna do it within 5 years after.
Right.
And it, you know, one
Yeah,
thing leads to
life
another.
happens.
You've got a big expenditure to do,
Right.
and it takes you a while to get
Thank
in
you.
the money you need to
Of course.
to build it.
Of course. Well, we never want to be a barrier, but we always just have to, you know, ask the questions that we need to ask. So I appreciate you entertaining them
Right.
and for your patience as you waited through our meeting. Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the table. If there's no other questions, I will call the vote. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the award of contract 2018-C20U, Park Hills Drainage Way Utility Relocation, introduced by Mr. Dave Mudricker.
Good evening. Bids were open for contract 2018-C20U on Tuesday, October 11th. Excuse me. Bid letting was advertised as required, attended by one individual along the township staff. Included in your packet is a memorandum from the township engineer regarding this project, and also attached is a copy of the bid tabulation. This project, as you may recall, was previously bid, contemplating that work would begin this year. It's also a precursor to construction of the Park Hills Drainage Way Improvement Project, in that there are utilities in that corridor that need to be relocated in advance of moving forward with drainage improvements. The first bid, we received no bidders. We advertised it, solicited it to many contractors, received some feedback that none of the contractors had any opportunity in this year to work it into their schedule. So we put it back out to bid, essentially the same, with a larger duration to complete the work. And we received one bid. We did not receive multiple bids. The bid that we did receive is higher than the engineer's estimate, which was around 250-some thousand. Predominantly, there's one particular item, and that's the directional drilling, that came in at closer to $75 a foot than $35 a foot, which caused the price increase that you see. Again, we have tried numerous ways to, attack this issue. This is the second time we put it out to bids. We did get one bid from Ravan, R-A-V-A-N, Inc., doing business as True Tech Drilling. That bid amount is $453,016.83. So I'm recommending that the Board of Supervisors award the contract to Ravan, Inc., doing business as True Tech Drilling, for a total of $453.16. I'm sorry, $453,000. Let me do this for the third time. $453,016.83.
It is, thank you. Okay, let's start with a motion.
This is Patty. I move that the Board of Supervisors award the contract that Dave Modricker just read to us and is listed in the agenda.
Thank you. Do a second.
I'll second.
Let's have some discussion.
Okay.
I'll start it off with a thank you to Dave. It sounds like it's a bit of a difficult one due to that horizontal drilling, and the estimate was really significantly different on that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure.
Okay.
We've had a lot of discussion on it. You know, the engineer's estimate was based on similar pricing and conversations that we had with contractors earlier in the year. We also wanted to try to advance the project this year to allow the drainage project to go to construction. So that's why you see the difference in the cost there. Even when we put it out to bid for work next year, we still only had one contractor that was, you know, interested in that work. I think if we were going, wow. So why are we doing directional drilling? Excuse me, the utilities that we're relocating out of the channel, we're putting those in adjacent to our cartway. So we have right-of-way that we're providing, but it is in an area with mature tree canopies. So we can't open cut, or if we did, we'd be
Significantly affecting the
We'd
landscape
be
in a manner
removing-
that would be very,
we'd be removing many trees out of front yards and along the cartway,
Yes.
which is not the approach that we take when we try to do work in our cartway in a tree that's in an area that's heavily, has large, you know, tree canopy. So that's the approach that we would expect of others, is to do directional drilling in that area. You know, interestingly, you'll see when I introduce my next memorandum, it also includes directional drilling. A little bit perhaps later in the year, we did get a better price on directional drilling, but again, only one bidder. But the unit price was lower. So, you know, this is work that, since the utilities have prior rights in the drainage way, we need to accommodate them, and the accommodation is at our cost. Now, in this case, we're doing the directional drilling in the conduit, but the power and the communication facilities are willing to pull their own cables, so they are contributing to it. They have an interest, you know, to get out of the drainage way too. You know, this is a tough spot. It's not work that, you know, we typically do. So it's a little bit out of the box in that regard. The only other option that we talked about, and I don't know that it would give us any better results, is to actually bid this work with the drainage improvement work, so that the contractor that's bidding on $1.5 million worth of drainage improvements also has to price in, you know, the cost to do the directional drilling. It's difficult to, it's a scenario we could do. It's somewhat difficult to imagine that it would be less expensive if we're trying to do it in the same time frame, because then you have a subcontractor that typically your general contractor is going to mark up, because
they're managing that project, then,
Right.
of course, yeah.
Yeah, the other thing we talked about or investigated was trying to have West Penn Power participate or take the lead, and they don't have any contractors that are available to do this kind of work to take the lead on it. So I really think we've, I don't know that we've exhausted, but we've certainly investigated all the options that we know of. We try our best to try to, you know, minimize costs and keep it within budget. This is the bidding climate that we're in, and this is, you know, the best price that we received.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a weird question for you.
No weird question.
Oh, darn. So,
I mean, the question's not weird. You can
okay. So I couldn't stop thinking about UAJ when you were talking. Do they do that kind of drilling? Is that what they did in the development there that we
blah, 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 et cetera, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so they did not do that.
Okay.
Because they did the curve, it's like a sideways drilling thing, you know,
Yeah,
but
so
it's not
there's-
that, okay.
So there's directional drilling where you set up a drill rig and you're pushing hard conduits through the ground. There's also something that is maybe a little easier, less expensive, but not as accurate and not for such long runs. And that's called, some people call it hole hogging, but it's a pneumatic device that is, you know, compressed, maybe compressed air that's forcing, it's called a hole hog, but it's kind of a little torpedo through under the roadway. So you can get short distances, you know, 20 feet, 30 feet with those. But for long runs, usually do directional drilling.
Okay.
UAJA is, they try to do all their work in-house, and they did all open cutting.
Open cutting,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, they
gotcha,
did.
okay, thanks.
Yes.
I'm learning more than I need to, and I'm asking questions I don't have to, but I thought while you brought it up, yeah. Any other questions
It was a
on
previous
this?
topic of a lot of discussion.
Yeah, it really was.
A little bit of controversy.
And it's about, you know, running the pipes, and it just seems
Yeah.
like, why not just take that opportunity for learning? So, okay, yeah, any questions?
So, what was the discussion around just rebidding again later, since this deadline was pushed out for the second round of bidding? What was the thought there about just not trying to wait and rebid? Or
Yeah,
put it
so
out
the
again?
first time we put it out to bid was for work this year, and we got 0 bidders. So, you know, we didn't have anything to bring forward to you other than just let you know we didn't get any bidders. So the thought was, all right, we'll put it out to bid again, similar scope, really didn't change anything, other than the time frame for them to do the work. So the time frame, I think, was in the first quarter of next year, although I need to review the contract to see exactly how much time we gave them. I think if we wanted to get better pricing, right, perhaps if we put it out to bid a year from now, but then, you know, when you push it out too far, then you're speculating
Correct.
as to what costs are. So maybe they have an opening in their schedule, but maybe there's other factors that increase costs. So
Right.
that's hard to predict. And so, you know, what we did was put it out to bid for next year. It was the second time we put it out to bid, and we got this one bidder. I don't know if that answered your question, or maybe you're looking for, you have a different question.
Well, I'm looking for putting it out again early next year. I'm so worried because this is really double the estimate, and it's one of the first big things we've done on a really big project. And I feel like all of our big projects are going this way, where the numbers are coming in double, and we can't just, okay everything. So I'm just really appreciative that you've been brainstorming different solutions, and I don't know that I'm ready to give that up yet, so.
I think the concern is if we bid the same project in the signed timeframe, the first quarter next year, and we put it out to bid early in the year, all we're doing is competing against workload that they've added between now and then. So it doesn't open up any time on their schedule. It doesn't mean that it might attract someone's attention for some reason that we don't know, and they might say, all right, you know, we're gonna bid on it now. But I can't tell you that would result in any better pricing.
And we could lose this bidder as not interested because we turned around and re-released the bid. And if it's only one that we got, and you do that, maybe, I don't know what that environment is like, but
Yeah.
if I just did the work to apply and I didn't get it, and then the same thing was released, I don't know how enthusiastic I would be.
It's not something that we would promote as great practice, because like you said, we've opened bids, you know, the bid tab's available, other bidders can see the bid tab, and now we're putting the same thing out on the street for the same
Right.
period, the
Like,
same
no, not you,
contract.
kind of.
Yeah, I don't know, it might open us up to
Yeah.
some issues that we're not prepared for.
Right. I'm gonna go to Eric Anderson, who's got his yellow hand up.
Hey, Laura. Just a general question. You talk about drilling. Is there a reason that you can't do trenching? And wouldn't be trenching be cheaper? That's really the only question I have.
Eric, you may not have heard my response earlier. Trenching would be cheaper. We're going through an area that's all mature trees and Park Hills area. So it'd be,
The trenching can't happen.
It isn't taking trees.
we'd be taking out the trees all along the frontage of the
Taking the
homes.
forest out of Park Forest.
Okay. Understand.
Thank you. All right. I think you did a great due diligence. I'm ready to move forward. I'm not enthusiastic about, and I mean, we have concerns about cost increases. I'm thinking about our own projects and how we have a level of control that we can.
How does this impact the timeline for the rest of the project if you're hoping to get it done this year and now it'll be first quarter?
Yeah, so this project is scheduled for next year.
2023.
2023. It would allow the utility drainage improvement project to move forward because the construction would follow kind of on the heels of the utility relocation.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I'll just chime in quickly. So this is a pretty highly visible project and has been a point of discussion for several years. And there's been a great deal of planning and effort on the side of engineers as well as with the consultant. And there is a timeline that has been presented, and we have some grants that we have currently aligned for this project that are, in sync with the timeline that we have for the project. We are, as you know, just a couple of meetings ago, the board did approve for us to advance forward with obtaining easements. So there's what I'll say, like a sequence of events that are following through. And so while I do understand the increase in cost, I think Dave, said it very well in that it's very difficult to predict the market right now. It's the market and the variability and unpredictability within the market that's really driving some of the inflation that we're seeing right now. One might speculate, sure, that perhaps if demand decreases, demand for services, et cetera, that sure, costs could go down. But with inflation and the supply chain management issues that we're facing right now globally, I'm not confident to even suggest prices will be up or down. I think that for sake of the project, moving forward based on previous consensus and motions on this project, I would strongly recommend that we advance forward in accordance with the recommendation from the township engineer.
Thanks.
Well, that was my other question about the timing of the grants, because I didn't want to risk that or the, progress on the project, but I think it's, I think most of the projects we do in the next year are going to be like this. Like I said, every project we're looking at right now is coming in so much higher than was estimated. And I think as we move into the budget, we have to really look at those numbers as if
Double.
If they're double,
If
and
the
it's,
capital
I
various,
mean, so it's, I think it's just an indication of where we're going. It's really, really concerning, so.
Yeah. I'm thinking about it for us and for COG as well. And where those unpredictable increases might be found.
Well, and I'm really, even just this project, what the estimates were.
Right.
So it's,
Right.
It's a major what we have going on next year, and the biggest one really with stormwater program plan, so.
Right.
Yeah. But,
Yeah, the only other alternative, and I'm not saying it's a better alternative, would be, if you did not award this, would be to include this work in the drainage contract that we put out to bid later this year. That's the only other alternative. And again, I can't say that it's going to result in
Uh-huh.
anything less in price. I guess the only advantage is it would afford you the opportunity to say, I don't want to do the project at all.
Yeah, that's what I think is like, I think the only way we were gonna do that is we're gonna kick it down the road a little bit, and that's not, I'm not interested in doing that.
Yeah.
Based on what we said about the grants, based on where we are in this project, but I think Supervisor Strickland, like what we talked about with COG, we're then saying that we've prioritized this, and moving into the budget, we need to think about it in that way.
And I think too, when we planned this project, it was exceeding what the initial very narrow scope was going to be. So this really took on a different look and feel, and that it is really environmentally sensitive, which, and all these things are negative, but it was decisions made along the line that it's going to be aesthetically pleasing.
Yes.
It's environmentally sensitive. It's, you know, we're protecting the tree canopy. These are all decisions that are made.
It's not hard hammering or whatever.
So
the
it's-
words are.
yeah.
Armoring,
Mm-hmm.
yes. Agree.
So, you know, I mean, I don't know what the original scope would look like at this point, but we can't go back there. So I'm just
No.
saying it's a
Yeah.
it's a process of, you know, or a progress of decision making. And I think we just have to be mindful that these costs are just expanding as we move forward. So,
And set scope for things.
Mhm.
Absolutely, absolutely, thank you. Anything further?
No, I think I've
Okay.
laid out what information I can to
Yep.
help you make a decision.
Yep, I'm ready. I'm gonna call for a vote. All in favor of awarding this contract as described, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Motion passes unanimously. All right, thank you for having thought through this and being ready and prepared to help us navigate that decision.
Yes.
Next up, we have award of contract 2019-C1 Pine Grove Mills LED streetlight conversion, also introduced by you, Mr. Modricker.
Thank you. So bids were opened publicly for contract 2019 C21. This is the Pine Grove Mills LED streetlight conversion contract on Tuesday, October 25th, 2022. Again, the bid letting was advertised and sent to a number of interested bidders. The project replaces the existing high-pressure sodium lights with retrofits on 25 lights on Pine Grove Road, 10 lights on Nixon Road. It removes those 35 lights from the West Penn power tariff. It installs disconnects. The relamps are 2,700 Kelvin lamps. So those are the lowest Kelvin that we could find. This project also involves directional drilling because we are installing conduit. We did have one bidder, M&D Services LLC, $292,792.86. This particular project is within the allocated budget and within the engineer's estimate, which is in your packet, but I believe somewhere in the $293,000 range. So just
Yeah, just, like,
Just-
it's in there, yeah.
within the engineer's
gonna
estimate.
get
but-
you-
remarkably close,
Yeah.
I was gonna
I'm happy to
say.
report that this is within our budget and
Yes.
our engineer's
Yes.
estimate.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, does involve directional drilling.
Right.
So I'm recommending that the Board of Supervisors award the contract to M&B Services LLC for a total of $292,792.86 for their bid.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
I recommend that we approve the motion as stated by the Public Works Director.
This is Lisa, I'll second.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion?
I was going to make the comment on how incredibly close the engineer's estimate was to the bid. That's really something. And just, I guess, the difference in the cost of the directional drilling. So it is more here than it was in the estimate too. But is it even more because of the trees at Pine Hall or Pine Hall, Park Hills?
I can't tell you exactly why, because I believe it ends up being, they have a subcontractor that's doing the drilling, and I think it's the same firm that's doing the work.
That was my
at
next
Park
question.
Hills.
Can we get that outfit?
But in this case, the unit price that was bid is lower, so I don't know if it was a different estimator, if there's something to the project that's more attractive.
When they have, when they're a subcontractor versus they're the main
Or
contractor, it's
if they've
more
got other
accessible.
work in the area. The timeframe, is slightly different, but similar. They're both projects for, next year. We got better pricing on this one.
and within budget, which we love.
Yeah, I wish we can get
I know.
that kind of quote on the other one, but,
This is also
And-
another project that's been a long time coming, so
It
thank you
has.
so much.
Yeah,
for-
thanks for your patience.
Yeah, thank you. Just many thanks. So it's exciting and it's a change for Pine Grove Mills because we'll be moving to from the pink or orange lights, depending on your rods and cones in your eyeballs, to the LED, which is more of like a amber or a white with what we're picking with the 2700K. But typically when people experience a change from the sodium halide or various sodium varieties to an LED, there's some adjustments to make, but we did pick a very low dispersing light, so that adjustment should be minor and better for the environment. And, so thank you very much.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for all of the time that's been put into this particular project, which might seem like a minor thing, but there was so much public input, so many, public meetings about this, demonstrations, the light box. I mean, a lot of work went into this one project because it really is impactful on those residents, and I think that was seen by staff. So I'm very appreciative of all that outreach.
You're welcome. Yeah, where we thought there were touch points that you were interested in or the public wanted to know, we tried to bring that back in front of you.
All right, do we have a motion? I'm sorry, I'm losing track.
Yes.
We have a motion and a second
Yes.
on the table. If no further questions, call the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The motion passes unanimously. We're on to communications to the board. Any communications anyone would care to share? All right, I'm seeing nothing. We've got calendar items. Just pointing out, next week we have our budget meetings, November 9th and 10th. You'll check our website for the times. They are found on our calendar. And of course, Election Day is coming up next week. And we'll be closed for Veterans Day. Anything else? Okay. We're also closed for Thanksgiving. Very good. If there's nothing else, we have reached the moment where I'm gonna,
Just a quick comment,
Yep.
we're closed the day of Thanksgiving and the day after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Our administrative offices are closed.
Okay, so Thanksgiving and the day after Thanksgiving, known as Black Friday, I think, right? All right.
But you'll be here if there's a blizzard.
All right.
Great.
Oh, one moment for a sidebar. Anything that comes out of that?
No,
So
Yeah.
administrative offices are closed, but staff is working on Friday unless they have taken a day.
Okay,
So
so
we
for
are
any
vi-
staff that are listening right now, let's clarify that. Very good.
Thank you.
Jeremy, Supervisor Jeremy wanted to make sure the public works were available that day. and I said,
Okay.
Yes, we are.
Very good, very good.
Very good.
So
Don't
only
don't
one-
shoot me if there's a blizzard, but just making
Right.
sure.
Yeah, just
We have
checking.
plow
Just
trucks on
checking.
standby
That's
that day.
right, always.
But don't ask them to do the week after because it's hunting season.
Oh, forget about it. No emergency.
So it would rather snow than be forward or out hunting.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right.
Or just not snow
We
at
make
all.
a motion to adjourn.
Oh, yes, we should do that.
I'm not calling for it. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay.
All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
So be it. We're adjourned.